Welcome to OOTO, the Out of the Office Investigation. Usually when we picture the Amazon rainforest, there's this expectation of just overwhelming, unstoppable fertility.
Right, you think of it as the ultimate cradle of life.
Exactly. You imagine dropping a single seed onto the jungle floor, and by the next morning, bam, it's sprouted into this massive vine. We see this endless, dense canopy of green, literally the most lush environment on Earth. So we naturally just assume the ground underneath it must be the absolute richest, most life-giving dirt imaginable.
I mean, it feels like an undeniable biological equation, right? Like maximum life above ground must equal maximum fertility below ground.
But it doesn't.
No, it completely shatters that assumption. When you step into the actual reality of tropical soil science, you're looking at a geological landscape that is a profound paradox, because the native soil of the Amazon isn't rich at all.
Not even a little bit.
It's actually a highly toxic, highly acidic, nutrient-poor red clay.
Which is wild to think about. That means the lushness we see is essentially an illusion.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because the overwhelming majority of the nutrients in a tropical rainforest, they aren't actually in the soil. They are completely locked up in the living biomass.
The trees, the vines, the insects.
Right, the animals, everything living. The red clay beneath them is just this barren slate. I mean, if you clear a patch of that forest to grow crops, the intense monsoon rains just immediately wash away whatever tiny trace nutrients are left.
And it happens fast.
Yeah, the land goes completely barren after, just 2 harvests? It just turns into dead dirt.
Which brings us to the core of this deep dive. Because this discovery by a Dutch soil scientist back in 1966, a guy named Wim Sambroek, it wasn't just some neat geological anomaly.
Yeah, it was a total game changer.
Exactly. It turned out to be a blueprint that not only explains how to permanently fix barren dirt today, but one that directly dictates your cognitive health and is even actively being used right now to fight off modern corporate agriculture.
So Sambroek is walking through the Amazon, and he finds these patches of earth that just completely defy all the rules of tropical geology we just talked about. He finds what the locals call terra preta de indio, right?
Yeah, the black earth of the Indians.
And we should clarify, this wasn't just a slightly darker shade of topsoil.
Oh, no, not at all.
This was a man-made, intensely black, highly structured earth, and it went deep, like up to 6 feet deep in some places.
Which is massive for topsoil.
Huge. And the most staggering part to me is that it had remained continuously fertile for 2,000 years. 2 millennia. Without ever needing a single drop of synthetic fertilizer.
It's incredible. When researchers finally analyzed it, they found it holds 70 times more charcoal, 3 times more organic matter, and up to 20 times more phosphorus than the surrounding jungle dirt.
Wait, 20 times?
Yeah, we are talking 200 to 400 milligrams per kilogram.
That is just insane. So, okay, to understand how ancient Amazonian cities and some of these supported up to 100,000 people managed to thrive on that toxic clay, we really have to look at their relationship with fire.
Specifically, the difference between the destructive modern practice of slash and burn agriculture and their ancient indigenous practice, which we call slash and char.
Right, because modern slash and burn is just about absolute destruction. You cut down the forest, you set it on fire, and you just let it burn in the open air until there's literally nothing left but white ash.
And that ash gives you this tiny, super temporary spike in nutrients, but it completely destroys the actual physical structure of the soil.
But the ancient Amazonians didn't do that. They used this process called pyrolysis.
Pyrolysis is the absolute core mechanism behind terra preta. It's the secret sauce. Instead of burning organic matter in the open air where there's plenty of oxygen, they would smolder it.
In the low oxygen environment.
Exactly, in a low oxygen environment at very specific temperatures, right around 450 to 500 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
And when you restrict the oxygen at that exact heat threshold, the cellulose and lignin in the wood, they don't combust into ash.
So what happens to them?
The volatile compounds basically bake off as gas, and what you are left with is this highly stable, incredibly porous carbon structure. And that is what we call biochar.
And the geometry of this stuff, it honestly defies logic. Because the wood's cellular structure is somehow preserved during that smoldering process, right? So it becomes this microscopic honeycomb.
It's fascinating.
I read that if you take just 1 single gram of well-made biochar and you were to somehow unfold all of its internal microscopic crevices, it would have the surface area of an entire tennis court, just 1 gram.
1 gram, yeah. That surface area provides the physical architecture, but it's really the electromagnetic properties that make it function.
How so?
Well, biochar carries a strong, permanent, negative electrical charge. And in a soil environment, a lot of the really vital plant nutrients, things like calcium, magnesium, potassium ions, they carry a positive charge.
Ah, so it acts like a magnet.
A very powerful magnet. It binds those positively charged nutrients directly to its surface so they don't just wash away in the heavy monsoons. It creates this permanent nutrient bank.
Okay, but I have to bring in an analogy here because there's a massive misconception about this for people trying it at home.
Oh, the raw charcoal issue.
Yes, because raw biochar is basically a massive, empty luxury hotel.
Yeah.
You have millions of these microscopic rooms. You've got incredible architecture and absolute stability. But if you just go out, buy a bag of raw charcoal and dump it directly into your garden, it is a complete disaster.
It really is.
If you put an empty sponge like that into the ground, it acts like a vacuum. It will aggressively suck up all the existing nitrogen and water just to fill its pores. You will literally starve your plants to death in the short term.
You're listening to OOTO with research by El Campesino de la Huerta. And that vacuum effect you mentioned, that's exactly why modern gardeners fail when they just buy raw charcoal.
Right.
The aggressive absorption is actually a feature, not a bug, but only provided you preemptively saturate it. The ancients understood this intimately. They knew the hotel needed guests before the doors opened.
So they didn't just bury charcoal.
No, they built an entire biological ecosystem.
So how did they do that? How did they populate it? And how can you, the listener, perfectly replicate this in your own backyard?
Yeah.
First, we need to look at what archaeologists are actually pulling out of these ancient pits, because it's definitely not just charcoal.
Right. They find a very specific, deliberate matrix of artifacts. They're pulling out animal carcasses and fish bones, which act as these incredible sources of slow-release calcium and phosphorus.
On the waste, right?
Yeah, human and animal waste. Plus, massive amounts of wood ash and broken terracotta pottery.
Right.
They were basically taking the raw biochar and marinating it in this super nutrient-dense, microbially active slurry for months before it ever became agricultural soil.
Which sounds intense, but recreating this alchemy today is actually surprisingly accessible. I mean, you don't need industrial equipment to make the biochar yourself. You can literally do it using a simple cone pit in the backyard.
It's very low-tech.
Super low-tech. You just dig a cone-shaped hole, you start a fire at the bottom, and you continuously layer wood on top. And the fire burning on top acts as a physical cap, right?
Exactly. It consumes all the available oxygen before it can reach the bottom.
Right, so that forces the wood underneath to smolder and undergo pyrolysis rather than just combusting into ash. And then, once the pit is full of this glowing black char, you have to instantly quench it with a massive amount of water. You basically drown it completely to stop the reaction.
And after you do that, you crush that raw biochar up to increase the surface area even further. Then you finally reach the charging phase.
The fun part.
Yeah. The home recipe basically requires a 9-to-1 ratio of topsoil to biochar. But crucially, before it touches your garden, you have to charge that biochar for, say, 14 to 48 hours using a liquid soak.
And people use all sorts of things for this. Compost tea, liquid kelp, or even diluted urine, which sounds gross, but there's a very specific chemical reason for that, right?
Absolutely. The urea in the urine breaks down into ammonia, which provides this massive heavy hit of nitrogen that the carbon sponge is just desperate for.
Or, if you don't want to do that, you can just mix it directly into an active compost pile and let it sit for a few weeks. The char absorbs the nitrogen, the microbiology moves into all those microscopic hotel rooms we talked about, and suddenly, bam, you have a living, breathing soil amendment.
We do need to set some realistic expectations here, though, regarding the transition period.
Yeah, it's not magic overnight.
Right. If you are starting with degraded, industrially farmed soil in your yard, adding terra preta doesn't instantly turn it into an ancient Amazonian paradise. There's this prominent 5-year chronosequence study.
Where they analyze different plots of land at different stages of recovery, side by side.
Exactly. And it shows us exactly how long it takes for the food web to reestablish itself.
Right, I remember this. The study showed that in year 1, you are purely setting the physical stage. Nothing crazy happens. It isn't until year 2 that you start seeing significant populations of microscopic mites and chytrate worms.
Which are essentially microscopic cousins of the earthworm. They shred up the organic matter and begin cycling nutrients.
But it takes a full 5 years to really develop a robust, complex food web featuring larger insects, crustaceans, and millipedes. It is a slow build.
And strategic placement is also really vital during this build. Because this Terra preta is so intensely nutrient-dense, nature actively seeks it out.
Nature wants those nutrients.
Oh, yeah. In one documented experiment, researchers dug these beautiful Terra preta trenches expecting incredible vegetable yields. But instead, those trenches were quickly invaded by the roots of nearby aggressive oak and magnolia trees.
Oh, wow. They just stole it.
The trees completely hijacked the nutrient bank. They grew massive root systems directly into the biochar and just choked out the crops.
Okay, I want to circle back to something, though. The artifacts found in those ancient pits, specifically the broken terracotta pots, because I have to push back a little on modern gardeners doing this.
The reverse cargo culting argument.
Yeah. When people purposefully smash up terracotta pots and throw them into their compost bins just to replicate Terra preta, it feels a bit like reverse cargo culting to me.
We are copying the ancient recipe exactly, but do we actually know why the pottery works? Like, is it just structural, acting as physical condos for microbes? Or does fired clay have some sort of inherent electromagnetic property that helps bind the soil aggregates together?
It's a great question, and it's actually one of the most heavily debated questions in soil science today. The porous nature of low-fired terracotta definitely provides a distinct type of microbial habitat, and it's one that differs entirely from the carbon structure of biochar.
So it's like a different type of hotel.
Exactly. It creates varied microclimates for different strains of bacteria. Furthermore, the clay chemically buffers soil acidity and drastically enhances moisture retention during droughts.
But did the ancients know that? Probably not on a chemical level. The ancients likely threw broken pots into their waste pits simply as a means of trash disposal. But the resulting synergy was so biologically effective, they just kept doing it. It's essentially an emergent property of their waste management system.
That makes a lot of sense. But here's the big question for the listener. Why go to all this trouble? Why dig pits and smolder wood and bury bones and charcoal and broken pottery in your yard?
It's all about human health.
Exactly. Because that soil microbiome doesn't just stay in the dirt. When you pull a carrot out of that trench you built, you're pulling up that exact microscopic ecosystem, and it forms a direct biological pipeline to your physical durability, your mental outlook, and your longevity.
The contrast with our current food system is just stark. I mean, industrial agriculture treats soil like a plastic cup that just holds a plant upright, while farmers pump it full of chemical IV drips.
We rely entirely on synthetic salts and frequent heavy tillage.
And that tillage physically rips apart the delicate fungal networks that act as the soil's digestive system. When you kill those fungi, the crops completely lose their ability to pull up trace minerals.
You're listening to OOTO, with research by El Campesino de la Huerta. And because that dead soil, we are essentially growing beautiful, empty cardboard. Over the last 60 years, the amount of iron, zinc, and vital phytonutrients in our vegetables has absolutely plummeted.
Because the soil is dead, the food is empty.
Right. And that empty food is the baseline for the ultra-processed diets, driving modern diabetes, heart disease, and widespread systemic inflammation.
This failure brings us to what researchers call the ecosystem nexus. There is a continuous, unbroken biological line between the health of the soil and the health of the human gut.
They are directly linked.
Intimately. When you use regenerative methods like Terra preta, the charged biochar cultivates a thriving, hyperdiverse soil microbiome. Those microbes operate symbiotically with plant roots. In exchange for plant sugars, the microbes literally mine critical, hard-to-access minerals like zinc and iron.
And they stimulate the plant to produce a rich array of protective antioxidants and phytochemicals. So when you eat that hyperlocal, nutrient-dense food grown in your biochar soil, you aren't just eating static vitamins. You are ingesting beneficial microbiology.
You are literally populating your own gut with a diverse array of bacteria that originated right there in that black earth.
And those gut bacteria have a highly specific physiological job once they're inside you.
Right, they do. When they ferment the complex plant fibers from that healthy food, they produce specialized metabolites called short-chain fatty acids.
Okay, what do those do?
These fatty acids are powerful biological signaling molecules. They enter your bloodstream, they downregulate systemic inflammation throughout your entire body, and they profoundly boost your immune function.
Okay, but if I'm listening to this right now, I'm probably thinking, wait, you're telling me I can cure my anxiety and boost my intelligence by playing in black dirt. Walk me through the actual science of that leap. How does dirt affect the brain?
The mechanism is the gut-brain axis, which is heavily mediated by the vagus nerve. Those exact same short-chain fatty acids produced by your gut bacteria, they actually cross the blood-brain barrier.
Wow.
Yeah. Furthermore, the bacteria in your gut manufacture the vast majority of your body's neurotransmitters, including serotonin and dopamine.
The happiness chemicals.
Exactly. So a diverse gut microbiome, fed by diverse soil, directly regulates that neurotransmitter production. It actively clears neurological inflammation, which is the root cause of brain fog, and physically stabilizes the neural pathways associated with mood.
So it isn't just a metaphor, it's literal evolutionary biology.
Right.
If human biology co-evolved over millions of years with dense soil biodiversity, then modern anxiety, brain fog, and chronic illness are quite literally just symptoms of a global soil deficiency.
We have divorced ourselves from the microbial ecosystem that our bodies biologically require for baseline functioning.
That is profound. By restoring the soil and our immediate environment, we are restoring our own internal biological operating system.
Because the microbes in the dirt are the exact same workers needed to run the factory in our gut.
Which brings up a very dark, very necessary question about the global economy. If Terra Preta permanently fixes soil fertility, drastically improves human cognitive health, and can be made basically for free from yard waste, why was this ancient science virtually buried and ignored for 60 years after Wim Sombroek discovered it?
You always have to follow the economics.
Oh boy.
The synthetic fertilizer industry is a $27 billion global machine, and its entire business model relies on one fundamental concept: dependency. In the industrial model, the farmer must buy chemical inputs every single year just to achieve a basic yield.
An agricultural treadmill.
Yes. If they stop buying, the dead dirt stops growing.
But biochar forces us to treat soil entirely differently. Because it isn't a chemical IV drip. It is a permanent battery. You charge it once, you put it in the ground, and it pays dividends for a millennium.
And you cannot monopolize charcoal. You cannot patent a hole in the ground. And you definitely cannot put a subscription model on a 2,000-year-old battery. Big Ag simply cannot sell you a subscription to Terra Preta.
That makes total sense.
Oh.
And that inability to monopolize the science is exactly why the most exciting developments in regenerative soil aren't happening in corporate laboratories. They are happening at the grassroots level.
Absolutely. Massive agroecology movements are recognizing the power of regenerative soil to break the cycle of rural debt. Look at Brazil's landless workers movement, the MST, or the zero-budget natural farming movement in India.
Right. These aren't just quaint community gardening clubs.
No, they're profound survival strategies. Smallholder farmers are pooling their resources, creating localized biochar pits, and sharing the inoculants to empower millions of people.
And they achieve this by intentionally adopting a slow-growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because in Western industrial capitalism, the sole objective is hypergrowth, extracting maximum yield at any cost, which inevitably leads to the ruin of the land.
But these grassroots communities focus instead on local ecosystem success. By building permanent soil fertility with methods like biochar, they completely insulate themselves from the extreme volatility of global fertilizer markets.
They prevent corporate consolidation of their land because they aren't going into massive debt to buy chemical inputs. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I just can't get over the incredible irony of modern education here. We have agricultural universities all over the world training thousands of students in precision chemical formulations.
Oh, the curriculum is intensely industrial.
They are teaching them debt-driven farming, highly complicated synthetic NPK ratios, satellite-guided pesticide application. Meanwhile, true permanent sustainability, the kind that literally lasts 2,000 years, is as simple as digging a tone pit, smoldering some yard waste, and marinating it with fish bones and compost. We are teaching complex destruction while aggressively ignoring simple, enduring creation.
It is a striking contradiction. It really highlights how we've treated the soil as just a bank account to be continuously drawn down, rather than a living ecosystem to be partnered with. The shift to regenerative agriculture, to deeply understanding and utilizing ancient tools like biochar, it requires a complete paradigm shift in how we value land, human health, and community autonomy.
So taking control of your soil isn't just a weekend gardening project. It is a literal act of rebellion. When you build Terra Preta, you are stepping off the treadmill of corporate dependency. You are actively restoring your own physical and mental health through that gut-soil nexus we discussed.
You're freeing your local community from the volatility of global markets.
And you are transforming barren, exhausted dirt into a self-renewing engine of life. It is a hyper-localized, highly accessible solution to a cascading set of massive global crises.
It empowers the individual in a way very few things can.
Which is why I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought about your own legacy. The process of making biochar physically sequesters carbon. It locks it away in a microscopic hotel structure that remains perfectly stable for thousands of years.
Long after we're gone.
Exactly. The Terra Preta that you mix in your backyard today, the soil you carefully charge and tend to, will outlive you. Consider the fact that the most enduring, permanent mark you leave on this planet might not be a building or a bank account or a marble monument. Your greatest legacy might be a single patch of incredibly black earth, teeming with microscopic life that will continue to harbor biology and feed your descendants 1,000 years from now.
It forcefully puts our fleeting place in the ecosystem into a really beautiful perspective.
It really does. It all comes back to that Amazonian paradox. The lush, vibrant life of the jungle wasn't an illusion. It was a testament to ancient human ingenuity. They looked at toxic red clay and figured out how to turn it into a permanent engine of life. And now that exact same knowledge is in your hands.